everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on something pretty interesting. Cynicism.
Cynicism.
Yeah. But not like the kind of everyday cynicism we see today, like everything's terrible kind of thing.
Right.
We're talking about cynicism as a philosophy.
A philosophy.
Yeah, going all the way back to ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys were they were really something else.
That's right. Yeah, we're talking about the OG cynics.
The OGs.
Back in 4th century BCE Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Think extreme minimalism.
Extreme.
Yeah, and radical honesty all rolled into one.
Okay, so we're talking about philosophers like Diogenes. Who famously lived in a clay jar.
Yeah, he's like the poster child for cynicism.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
His life was just a constant challenge to the status quo.
Yeah.
Almost like a performance art piece aimed at making people really question their everyday lives.
Okay, so living in a clay jar.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a pretty strong image.
It is.
But what does that actually mean? Like, what does it mean to be a cynic? Like, where does that word even come from?
Well, the word cynic, it comes from the Greek word kynikos, which means dog-like.
Dog-like.
Yeah, and it's a pretty apt comparison, believe it or not.
Oh, okay, so are we talking about like running around barking at people? I'm trying to picture Socrates doing that.
Not quite, but they were called dog-like because they embraced a very simple, natural way of life.
Okay.
They rejected like the comforts and the complexities of civilization.
So they were kind of like watchdogs of morality,
yeah,
in a way.
You could say that they weren't afraid to call out hypocrisy.
Right.
And challenge those in power.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture.
Yeah.
So what were some of the core beliefs that made cynicism so radical for its time?
So one of the central tenets of cynicism was this idea that virtue was the only true good.
Virtue is the only true good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything else, wealth, fame, pleasure,
yeah,
all distractions.
No.
Distraction.
From achieving true happiness.
So they were like the original minimalists.
Exactly.
Less is more,
yeah.
Experiences over possessions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they believed that true happiness comes from aligning yourself with nature.
With nature.
Yeah, free from all these artificial desires that society kind of tries to impose on us.
And Diogenes took this to the extreme right. I mean, living in a clay jar is definitely a statement.
Oh yeah.
Is there like a specific example of how he lived this belief?
Well, there's this famous story about Diogenes seeing a child drinking water from their cupped hands.
Okay.
And Diogenes, who at the time only owned a simple wooden cup,
okay,
was so struck by the child's simple act that he immediately threw his cup away.
Threw it away?
Yeah, he said, a child has beaten me in simplicity.
Wow. Okay, so virtue's key material possessions are out.
Yeah.
Did they have strong opinions about other societal structures too, like marriage or politics?
Yeah.
You bet. They saw those things as unnecessary entanglements, distractions from pursuing this life of virtue.
Yeah.
Marriage, family, political systems, just more societal constructs that pull you away from true freedom and self-sufficiency.
So they weren't exactly fans of the establishment then.
Not really.
But if they rejected all these societal structures, were they just hermits then completely isolated from everyone else?
Not really. They actually lived very public lives.
Okay.
Often in crowded marketplaces.
Okay.
But they did so on their own terms.
On their own terms.
And that's where the concept of anaideia comes in.
Anaideia. Okay, that one sounds intriguing. Break it down for me. What's that all about?
Anaideia is often translated as shamelessness.
Shamelessness.
It was essentially the cynic's way of rejecting social norms.
Okay.
Even the ones that most people would never even think to question.
So they were deliberately breaking social norms. What was the point of that?
Yeah.
Was it just to shock people?
Well, there was definitely an element of that. They would do things like perform bodily functions in public.
Okay.
Deliberately behaving in ways considered outrageous at the time.
Wow, they didn't hold back. But there had to be a deeper reason behind all of this, right? It wasn't just about being provocative for the sake of it.
They were trying to show how much emphasis we place on artificial social conventions.
Yeah.
How many of our behaviors are dictated by these unwritten rules, rather than by our own values or true desires.
Yeah.
They wanted to make people stop and think, why am I following these rules in the first place?
That's actually pretty clever. So by being shameless, they were actually encouraging people to examine their own sense of shame
Yeah.
and the arbitrary nature of social expectations.
Right.
But if someone like confronted them about their behavior, how would they respond? Would they just kind of shrug it off?
Well, they definitely wouldn't shy away from a debate. This is where another key element of cynicism comes into play.
Okay, parrhesia.
Parrhesia, another Greek word, I'm guessing. What does that one mean?
You got it. Parrhesia means fearless speech.
Fearless speech. Yeah.
Yeah, the Cynics were known for their blunt honesty,
Yeah.
especially when it came to criticizing those in power.
Right.
They weren't afraid to use insults, mockery, whatever it took to expose hypocrisy and advocate for what they believed to be true.
I can only imagine the kind of drama that unfolded when they unleashed their parrhesia, in the Athenian marketplace.
Oh yeah.
Do you have a good example of this fearless speech in action?
Oh, absolutely. There's the classic story of Diogenes and Alexander the Great.
So,
Alexander, at the height of his power, came to meet Diogenes,
mm.
who was, as usual, just hanging out in his clay jar.
In his clay jar.
Yeah, Alexander, impressed by Diogenes' reputation, offered to grant him any wish he desired.
Wow, talk about an opportunity. What did he ask for? Like a palace, mountains of gold? Nothing like that.
Yeah.
Diogenes simply looked up at Alexander and said, "Move out of my sunlight."
No way. He told the most powerful man in the world to get lost because he was blocking the sun.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It perfectly sums up the Cynic philosophy,
Yeah.
complete indifference to power and wealth,
Right.
and a willingness to speak truth to power no matter the consequences.
So we're starting to see how radical cynicism really was. But how did it influence the course of philosophical thought? Did it just kind of fade away, or did it leave a lasting impact?
Oh, it definitely left its mark. In
Yeah.
fact, cynicism was a major influence on another ancient Greek school of thought, Stoicism.
Stoicism.
Yeah.
Now that's a philosophy I've heard of. I know it's all about like resilience and self-control. What's the connection between cynicism and stoicism? So stoicism was kind of like cynicism 2.0,
Yeah, you could say that.
taking those core ideas of virtue and self-sufficiency, but maybe like making them a little more practical
Yeah.
for everyday life.
That's a good way to put it. So while the Cynics advocated for a complete withdrawal from society,
Yeah.
the Stoics believed that you could engage with the world
Okay.
while still maintaining that inner peace and detachment
Attachment.
from material things.
So instead of living in a clay jar, you could like have a family and a job,
Right.
but still strive for that cynic ideal of virtue.
Exactly. The Stoics believed you could find happiness through virtue while participating in society.
Oh, okay.
But even though Stoicism gained more traction,
Yeah.
those Cynic roots, they really had a ripple effect.
Hmm.
And we can see those ripples in various movements throughout history.
You mean beyond just the live off the grid types we might think of today?
Right.
What kind of movements are we talking about?
Well, think about it. The Cynics were all about simple living, rejecting materialism, challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
These ideas pop up in a lot of modern movements, even if we don't always make the connection.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're getting at. So like minimalism, for example, with its focus on owning less
Yeah.
and valuing experiences over things, that has a definite cynic vibe to it.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's almost like Marie Kondo meets Diogenes.
Right. Right.
And then you have movements like anarchism,
Yeah.
which rejects traditional power structures and hierarchies.
Right.
That rebellious spirit, that willingness to question everything that's straight out of the Cynic playbook.
It sounds like even though cynicism might not be a household name today, those seeds of thought have taken root in some unexpected places.
Yeah.
So cynicism was a major influence on Stoicism.
Yeah.
We see traces of it in various modern movements.
Right.
What ultimately led to its decline as a formal school of thought? Why did it kind of fade from prominence?
Well, as we talked about, Stoicism offered a similar path towards virtue and inner peace,
Right.
but without that more extreme antisocial edge.
Yeah, it's like choosing a nice salad over a plate of super spicy chili peppers.
Exactly.
Both good, but one's definitely easier to handle.
Right. And then you have the rise of Christianity,
Yeah.
which offered a very different worldview from the Cynics' individualistic and austere approach.
Mm-hmm.
Christianity emphasized compassion, forgiveness, community, things that didn't quite mesh with the Cynic way of life.
So perhaps cynicism was just too radical,
Maybe.
too far ahead of its time to truly take hold.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Right.
And there's also the fact that later cynics, the ones who came after figures like Diogenes,
Okay.
they seem to focus more on the showmanship of it all,
Okay.
the shocking behavior and the witty insults,
Hmm.
rather than actually living by those core principles of virtue and self-sufficiency.
So it's like they became the very thing they were initially criticizing.
Yeah, you could say that.
All style, no substance.
Right, but even if cynicism as a formal school of thought faded away, its legacy lives on.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
core ideas,
Yeah.
rejecting materialism,
Yeah.
challenging norms, living authentically.
Hmm.
They continued to inspire and provoke even thousands of years later.
That's pretty incredible. It's amazing how these ancient ideas can still feel so relevant today.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for us, the non-clay jar dwelling folks of the 21st century? How can we apply these cynic ideas to our modern lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's something each individual has to figure out for themselves.
Yeah.
But I think the cynics, they offer some valuable tools for navigating our complex world.
Okay, so how can we channel our inner cynic in a way that actually makes sense for modern life? Give me some practical examples.
Well, think about how much we're bombarded with advertising and messages telling us to buy.
Right.
The cynics would be horrified.
They would.
They'd tell us to step back,
Yeah.
question our desires, and ask ourselves if all this stuff is truly making us happy.
They'd probably tell us to toss our smartphones and go live in the woods.
Maybe, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that extreme.
Right.
It's more about being aware of how these external forces try to shape our desires and making conscious choices about what we allow into our lives.
So a little dose of cynicism can be an antidote to consumerism.
Yeah.
And help us find contentment in a simpler, more intentional way of living.
Exactly.
But what?
It goes beyond material possessions too.
Okay.
Cynicism also encourages us to question social norms and expectations.
Okay.
Are we doing things because we genuinely believe in them,
Mm-hmm.
or are we just going along with the crowd?
Hmm.
Are we afraid to speak our truth even when it's uncomfortable?
Like they're giving us permission to break free from those unspoken rules. That might be holding us back from being our true selves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in a world that's obsessed with conformity and appearances,
Right.
that message is more relevant than ever.
This has been such a thought-provoking dive into cynicism. I'm starting to see the appeal,
Yeah.
even if I'm not quite ready to trade my apartment for a clay jar.
I wouldn't expect you to. But we can all take something away from the cynics.
Yeah.
They remind us that true happiness comes from within,
Right.
not from external things.
Uh-huh.
They encourage us to live by our values, not by the dictates of society.
Right.
And they show us that a little bit of shamelessness and fearless speech
Yeah.
can be powerful tools for living a more authentic life.
So maybe cynicism isn't about being grumpy or negative,
Yeah.
but about embracing a radical form of authenticity and self-reliance.
Exactly. It's about stripping away the unnecessary, both materially and mentally, and focusing on what truly matters.
Mm-hmm.
Virtue, self-knowledge, and living in accordance with nature.
It's given me a lot to think about. You mentioned earlier that cynicism faded from prominence, but popped up in unexpected ways throughout history.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
It's interesting you bring that up because while cynicism as a formal school of thought did fade away,
Okay.
its influence can be seen in some unexpected places throughout history.
Really? Like
For
where?
instance, during the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
there were cynic philosophers who wandered from city to city, preaching about virtue and simplicity, often using satire and public stunts to criticize the excesses of the Roman elite.
Okay.
They were kind of like the ancient world's version of street preachers or social activists.
So even during a time of great imperial power, there were still those who clung to the cynic ideals.
Of simplicity and truth telling.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, and it doesn't stop there. Traces of cynicism can be found in various religious and philosophical movements throughout history,
Right.
from early Christian ascetics who rejected worldly possessions to medieval wandering preachers who challenged the authority of the church.
So it sounds like cynicism went underground,
Mm,
becoming a sort of countercultural undercurrent that reemerged
yeah.
whenever people felt the need to challenge the status quo or
Yeah.
reject the excesses of their time.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of cynicism's legacy, its connection to the world of comedy and satire.
Comedy. That's not the first thing that comes to mind when I think of cynicism. Um, how did they influence humor? So the cynics were funny. I have to admit, I don't usually associate philosophy with humor. How did they use comedy? Well, the cynics were masters of using wit, sarcasm, even insults, to expose hypocrisy
Right.
and challenge people's assumptions. It was a way to get people thinking differently
Yeah.
and to make them question things they might have blindly accepted before.
So they were like the original stand-up philosophers.
Yeah.
Using their words to poke fun at the absurdity of it all and make people laugh while they were at it.
Exactly. And that tradition has carried on throughout history.
Okay.
Think of some of the great comedians and satirists.
Mm-hmm.
Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
They all shared that cynical spirit, that willingness to push boundaries and challenge the status quo through humor.
It's really interesting to see how a philosophy from ancient Greece is still influencing comedy today.
Yeah.
But getting back to cynicism itself, is this a philosophy we should all strive to embody? Should we all be living in clay jars and telling off world leaders?
Maybe not to that extreme.
Right.
Cynicism in its purest form is pretty radical.
Okay.
It requires a level of detachment and self-denial that most people aren't willing or able to embrace.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we can't learn from the cynics
Right.
and find ways to apply their wisdom to our own lives.
Okay, so what are some key takeaways from our deep dive into cynicism, that we can actually use in our everyday lives?
Well, first and foremost, the cynics remind us of the importance of questioning everything.
Questioning everything.
Don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Think critically about the messages you're bombarded with every day, the values you're told to embrace, the expectations placed upon you.
Yeah.
Are they truly serving you, or are they keeping you trapped?
So channel your inner cynic and ask why.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
And speaking of discomfort, the cynics also teach us that a little shamelessness can be a good thing.
A little shamelessness.
Now, I'm not suggesting you start living on the streets or anything.
Right.
But don't be afraid to break free from social constraints that are holding you back from being your true self.
So embrace your individuality, even if it means standing out from the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Be bold, be different, be unapologetically.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful message.
It is. And finally, I think the most important lesson the cynics offer is that true happiness, it doesn't come from material possessions
Okay.
or external validation. It comes from within,
Within.
from living in alignment with your values.
Okay.
And finding contentment in simplicity.
So maybe we don't need that bigger house, that fancy car, that constant stream of new stuff
Right.
to feel fulfilled. Maybe true happiness comes from something much deeper, something more connected to who we really are.
Precisely. And that's a message that resonates more than ever in our consumer-driven, social media obsessed world.
Right.
So while most of us probably aren't going to adopt the full cynic lifestyle, I think we can all benefit from integrating a bit of that cynical spirit into our lives, questioning assumptions, rejecting materialism, and living authentically.
This has been an incredibly insightful journey into the world of cynicism.
Right.
It's challenged my perceptions and given me a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating philosophy with you.
Likewise.
And to our listeners, we leave you with some questions to ponder. Are we Are we truly free, or are we slaves to consumerism and social expectations?
Mm.
Could embracing simplicity and rejecting superficiality lead to greater happiness? How much of our behavior is driven by our own values versus simply conforming to what others expect of us? These are questions the cynics were grappling with over 2,000 years ago,
Wow.
and they're still relevant today. Maybe it's time we all tapped into that cynical spirit and started questioning the world around us a little more.
That's a great note to end on. If you're feeling inspired to question, to challenge, to simplify, maybe it's time to delve a little deeper into the world of cynicism. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Who knows? Maybe there's a little cynic in all of us just waiting to break free.
And that wraps up our deep dive into cynicism. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay curious.